The sun sets behind the Rockies as Sarah huddles with her children under a blue tarp. This is not the Colorado dream that draws thousands of newcomers each year. This is the reality of homelessness that has grown by 43% since 2023. I'm Dr. Maya Johnson, and for the past decade, I've studied housing insecurity and addiction across America. What's happening in Colorado now isn't just a housing problem or a drug crisis, it's a perfect storm tearing families apart. Let me walk you through what I've witnessed over 6 months. First, fentanyl has transformed addiction on these streets. Unlike previous drugs, fentanyl is cheaper, more potent, and far deadlier. Just 2 milligrams, a few grains of salt, can kill. In Denver, outreach workers report 7 out of 10 homeless individuals have used fentanyl or know someone who's overdosed. Sarah never imagined using drugs. "I was a dental assistant," she says quietly. "Then I hurt my back. The doctor's pills stopped, but the pain didn't. The jump from prescription painkillers to street drugs took less than 3 months." Now she uses just to avoid getting sick from withdrawal while trying to keep her children fed and safe. The second troubling trend is mothers with children living outdoors. Family homelessness in Colorado has jumped 58% since 2024, with over 1,200 children under 12 now without stable housing in Denver alone. Many, like Sarah, became homeless recently, pushed to the edge by rising rents or medical bills, then tipped over by addiction. Most shelters separate men from women and older boys from their mothers, splitting families at their most vulnerable moments. Given this impossible choice, many mothers remain unsheltered rather than be separated from their children. The result? Encampments where kids do homework by flashlight while parents struggle with daily survival. Third, the barriers to help have become nearly impossible to overcome. Treatment centers have months-long waiting lists, and most require an address and ID, things many homeless people no longer have. "I've tried getting help 7 times, explains Miguel, now living under a highway. "Either there's no beds, or they don't take Medicaid, or no one speaks Spanish. You just stop trying." Housing programs face similar challenges. With average 2-bedroom apartments exceeding $2,300 in Denver, even working families struggle. Emergency rental assistance typically runs out by mid-month. What many don't realize is that the visible problems, addiction, families sleeping in cars, endless waiting lists, are just symptoms of deeper issues. Behind each person is a story of systems that failed them, opportunities that vanished, and safety nets that collapsed. As night falls, Sarah tucks her children into sleeping bags. "The hardest part isn't being homeless," she whispers. "It's watching my kids realize this is their life now. This crisis isn't happening in shadows anymore. It's in plain sight across Colorado." But seeing isn't understanding. To truly grasp what's happening, we need to look beneath the surface. Let's dive deeper into what's really fueling this crisis. The first hidden factor is Colorado's housing market, which has spiraled beyond what working families can afford. Since 2020, housing costs have increased 76%, while wages only rose 12%. The math simply doesn't work anymore. "I was paying $1,450 for our 2-bedroom apartment in 2023, explains Melissa, a nursing assistant and mother of 3 now living in her car. "When renewal came, they wanted $2,200. My entire monthly paycheck is $2,600. The affordable housing shortage means over 140,000 Colorado families now spend more than half their income on housing, leaving no buffer for emergencies. The camera pans across a parking lot where dozens of cars serve as makeshift homes, many containing families who still work full-time jobs. This is the new face of homelessness. People who shower at gyms before heading to work, whose children still attend school, who appear to be making it until you realize they have nowhere to sleep at night." The second underlying factor is Colorado's mental health crisis. The state ranks 51st in the nation for adult mental health care access, dead last behind all other states and DC. Waiting times for psychiatric appointments extend up to 8 months, even for those with insurance and stable housing. For someone like James, a former electrician living under a bridge since his bipolar disorder led to job loss, the situation is impossible. "Without my meds, I can't work. Without work, I lost my apartment. Without an apartment, I can't get consistent treatment. It's a circle with no exit." Mental health and addiction feed each other in a deadly cycle, made worse by the third factor, catastrophically limited substance abuse treatment. There are only 38 residential treatment beds for every 100,000 Colorado residents, less than half the national average. The cruel joke, says Dr. Elena Sanchez from Denver Health, is telling people they need treatment while making that treatment virtually inaccessible. Treatment that does exist often can't address the complexity of fentanyl addiction, which requires longer recovery periods and more intensive medical support than many facilities can provide. The fourth factor affecting families specifically is the economic fragility of parenthood. Colorado has the fifth highest childcare costs in the nation, averaging $1,400 monthly for one child. For minimum wage workers earning about $2,600 monthly, childcare alone consumes over half their income before rent, food, or transportation. When addiction enters this precarious equation, the entire system collapses rapidly. Maria, 34, lost her housing within 2 months of developing an addiction. I was already choosing between childcare and rent every month. When I started using, everything fell apart in weeks. These aren't just statistics, they're the forces crushing real families across Colorado. The truly shocking part is how quickly someone can go from stable housing to the streets when these factors align. Now that we understand these deeper issues, we need to examine the systemic problems that allow this crisis to persist and grow, even as it becomes increasingly visible in communities across the state. Now we need to confront the systemic barriers that keep this crisis growing despite increased awareness. These are the invisible walls that trap people in homelessness, particularly mothers struggling with addiction. The first systemic issue is the fragmented policy approach. Colorado has over 40 separate agencies and nonprofits addressing homelessness, each with different eligibility requirements, application processes, and service areas. This creates what experts call a service maze, nearly impossible to navigate, especially while managing addiction or caring for children. Lisa, an outreach worker with 15 years of experience, explains, "I need 8 different applications for one family to get basic services: housing vouchers, addiction treatment, childcare assistance, food benefits. Each form requires different documents. Miss one appointment and you might lose eligibility for months." For someone like Amber, who walks 2 miles daily with her 4-year-old son to find food and shelter, this system is unworkable. "I was told to attend 5 different appointments in 1 week, all across Denver. I don't have bus fare or a phone. How am I supposed to do that while keeping my child safe?" The second systemic barrier is profound social stigma that shapes policy and community response. Public meetings about homeless services frequently draw fierce opposition from residents who view homelessness as a moral failure rather than a systemic problem. The camera shows footage from a recent town hall where homeowners shouted down proposals for a women's shelter in their neighborhood. This stigma is even more pronounced for mothers with addiction, who face judgment not only for their substance use, but for continuing to care for their children while homeless. "People see me and assume I'm a bad mother who doesn't love her kids," says Danielle, 26, who became homeless after fleeing domestic violence. "They don't ask what happened or how they could help. They just want us gone, out of sight." This stigma directly impacts funding priorities, with Colorado spending 23 times more on law enforcement responses to homelessness than on permanent supportive housing programs, despite evidence that housing programs cost less and work better. The third systemic issue is the intergenerational cycle now taking hold. Children experiencing homelessness are 3 times more likely to become homeless as adults. Without intervention, we're witnessing the creation of a permanent underclass trapped in generational poverty and housing instability. In a quiet moment, 8-year-old Zoe, Sarah's daughter, explains how she hides her situation from classmates. "I tell them I live in an apartment, not a tent. I don't want them to know." She's already learning to navigate the shame society places on her family's situation, a burden no child should carry. These systemic issues create a perfect trap: services too fragmented to access, communities too hostile to provide safe options, and children learning early that they exist outside society's protection. Yet, within this bleak landscape, solutions do exist, approaches proven to work when properly funded and implemented. The question is whether Colorado has the political will and community compassion to embrace them. The most powerful solution to this crisis lies in a housing-first approach combined with integrated services, a model that's reduced family homelessness by 87% in communities that fully implemented it. This isn't theory, it's proven practice. The evidence is compelling. When families receive stable housing first, followed by coordinated addiction treatment, mental health care, and economic support, recovery rates triple, and children show rapid improvements in school performance and emotional well-being. Most importantly, this approach costs 43% less than managing homelessness through emergency services, shelters, and law enforcement. In Boulder County, a small pilot program called Mothers Forward demonstrates this model. The camera shows Sarah and her children walking into a modest apartment. "This is the first time in 14 months my kids have had their own beds," she says, her voice breaking. The program provides housing without sobriety requirements, bringing services directly to families instead of expecting them to navigate fragmented systems. Case manager Tanya Rodriguez explains, "We don't make mothers jump through hoops when they're in crisis. We stabilize housing first, then build relationships, then address addiction and other needs." The results speak for themselves. 72% of mothers in the program maintain stable housing after 2 years, and 68% achieve addiction recovery, compared to just 24% in traditional programs. For individuals watching who want to help, there are immediate actions that make real difference. Support organizations that follow evidence-based practices, like housing first models. Advocate for zoning changes that allow affordable housing and treatment centers in all neighborhoods. Most importantly, challenge the stigma by speaking up when others dehumanize people experiencing homelessness. "What changed my life wasn't just housing," explains Jessica, a program graduate now 2 years sober and working as a peer counselor. "It was being treated like a person with potential, not a problem to solve." Policy solutions require greater coordination, with Colorado needing a unified system that creates one door for all services. When Houston implemented this approach, they reduced homelessness by 63% in 5 years. Denver's fragmented system, by contrast, saw increases every year despite increased spending. The moral imperative is clear when looking at the children caught in this crisis. Zoe, now in stable housing for 3 months, proudly shows off homework with perfect scores. "I can do my work at a real table now," she says, "and I'm not tired all the time. These children deserve the chance to break the cycle before it defines their lives." As this crisis continues growing across Colorado, we face a fundamental choice about who we are as a community. Will we continue treating symptoms while ignoring causes, or will we commit to solutions we know work? I'm Dr. Maya Johnson, and after 6 months documenting this crisis, I'm convinced that we can solve family homelessness and the fentanyl epidemic, but only with the courage to see these mothers and children not as problems, but as our neighbors deserving of compassion, dignity, and practical help. The solutions exist. The question is whether we'll use them.